She wanted to marry her bodyguard. Never knew he was a hidden billionaire. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic millionaire stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. It was one of those New York nights when the sky seemed to split open. Rain poured down in thick silver sheets, drumming against the glass towers and washing neon lights into watercolor streaks. Inside a black limousine parked in front of the Imperial Hotel, Ava Nguyen, 30 years old, CEO of Ava Nguyen Group, sat frozen behind tinted glass. Cameras flashed outside like lightning. Her phone vibrated non-stop board members, reporters, her father's attorney, all demanding one thing: her agreement to an arranged marriage that would merge two empires. She pressed her palms together, whispering to herself, "I built this company with my own hands. I will not sell my future for shares." The door opened. The rain slammed in, cold and wild. A voice from outside shouted, "Miss Nguyen, please, one photo!" "Is it true you are engaged to Nathan Cole?" Dozens of lenses turned toward her. She could hardly breathe. For a moment she thought of surrendering, then she saw a narrow alley behind the flashing lights. She ran. The street was slick, her heels striking the pavement like desperate heartbeats. Traffic horns roared as she darted across a lane. Suddenly a dark sedan swerved, tires screaming. A hand grabbed her arm and pulled her back just in time. The car missed her by inches, splashing a wave of dirty water over both of them. "Are you all right?" The man's voice was calm, low, steady. Ava blinked through the rain. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a soaked security jacket with the Avenir Event Protection logo. His dark hair clung to his forehead. A cut on his cheek was bleeding slightly, but he did not seem to notice. I did not see the car," she stammered. "Clearly," he said with a faint half-smile. "You should not be out here alone. The press is going wild." "I do not need protection," she snapped, more out of pride than truth. "Maybe not," he replied, his eyes steady on hers. "But you almost needed an ambulance." For a moment they stood there, rain falling between them like a curtain. Ava realized she was shivering. Without hesitation, the man took off his jacket and placed it over her shoulders. It was heavy, still warm from his body. "Thank you," she whispered. "What is your name?" "Ethan," he said simply. "Ethan Cole. I was assigned to tonight's security detail." Ava nodded, trying to steady her breath. There was something in his eyes, quiet, strength, no hint of curiosity or judgment, just duty. But as she looked closer, she saw something else, too, something that did not fit the role of an ordinary guard. Rainwater traced down his jawline. His posture was straight, composed, almost military. His voice carried a kind of authority that felt learned, not hired. "Miss Nguyen," he said, gesturing toward the car, "you need to get somewhere safe. The paparazzi will circle back." But she did not move. "You saved my life," she said softly, "and I do not even know you." He gave a small shrug. "You do now." That night, long after she reached the penthouse, Ava sat by the window watching the storm fade into mist. She could still feel the weight of his jacket on her shoulders, the calm in his voice when everything else was chaos. Somewhere downtown, the same man Ethan stood in the rain outside the hotel, watching the lights in her suite go out. He pulled a small silver chain from his pocket, the necklace she had dropped when he caught her. He turned it over in his hand, reading the engraved words, "For courage, from Mom." He smiled faintly. Courage, he thought. She is going to need a lot of that. What neither of them knew yet was that this night their collision under the rain was only the beginning. Ava thought she had met a bodyguard. In truth, she had just met the billionaire who would change the course of her life forever. The following morning, sunlight spilled across the skyline like gold dust, chasing away the night's storm. Inside the glass walls of Avenir headquarters, Ava Nguyen stood in her office, still wearing the same determination she had carried through the rain. Her assistants hurried in and out, carrying files, coffee, and questions, but she heard none of them. She kept seeing his face, the calmness in Ethan's eyes, the way his voice had steadied her heartbeat. Her phone buzzed again. "Ava, the board meeting starts in 10 minutes, her executive assistant reminded her. "I will be there," she replied softly, slipping on her blazer. As she walked into the boardroom, the tension was almost physical. 12 directors, all older men, stared at her from across the long marble table. At the head sat her father's business partner, Mr. Bernard Choi, the man who had arranged her potential marriage to Nathan Cole. "Miss Nguyen," he said, voice smooth and cold. "We hope you reconsider. The merger with Cole Energy will secure Avenir's expansion into Europe." Ava placed both hands on the table, her tone steady. "If you believe the company cannot grow without tying me to a contract I never agreed to, then perhaps it is not my company anymore." A murmur rippled around the room. Bernard smirked slightly. "You are young, Ava. You do not understand how fragile power can be." She met his gaze. "Maybe not, but I know integrity is not fragile." The room fell silent. She gathered her folder, turned, and walked out. For the first time in years, she felt something close to freedom, even if it was terrifying. Outside, 2 men in black suits waited by the elevator. One of them stepped forward. "Miss Nguyen, the press is downstairs again. Do you need an escort?" Before she could answer, another familiar voice spoke from behind her. "I will take it from here." She turned. Ethan stood there, crisp uniform, dry now, eyes just as unreadable as the night before. "You are still here?" she asked, surprised. "I was reassigned to your personal security detail," he said, by order of the event coordinator after last night's incident. Ava frowned. That was not necessary. "Perhaps," he said calmly, "but I take my job seriously." They rode the private elevator down to the parking level. The air between them was heavy but not uncomfortable. She noticed the cut on his cheek had darkened into a faint bruise. "You should have that looked at," she said quietly. "I have had worse," he replied, almost smiling. He opened the car door for her, the movement precise, disciplined. As she stepped in, she caught the faint scent of soap and rain still lingering on his jacket. Something about it made her chest tighten. The drive was quiet. Through the tinted window, the city moved like a film reel, blurry faces, umbrellas, flashing signs. Ethan focused on the road, hands steady on the wheel. Finally, Ava spoke. "You do not talk much, do you?" "Talking is not part of my assignment," he said. "And what exactly is your assignment, Mr. Cole?" He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "To keep you safe, Miss Nguyen. That is all." She turned her gaze back to the window, hiding a small smile. "You make it sound simple." "It usually is," he said, "until it is not." They pulled into the underground garage of her building. Ethan stepped out first, scanning the surroundings. His movements were efficient, professional, yet there was a quiet elegance to him, something refined that did not fit the typical profile of a security guard. Inside the elevator, Ava finally asked what had been circling in her mind since last night. "Why did you help me? You could have walked away like everyone else." Ethan looked straight ahead. "Because everyone else did." The answer hit her harder than she expected. She wanted to ask more, but the elevator doors opened to her penthouse. "Thank you, Ethan," she said softly. He nodded once. "I will be downstairs if you need me." She watched him disappear through the closing doors. For a long moment, Ava stood in the quiet hallway, surrounded by polished marble and silence, and realized how empty her world felt despite all the luxury. Later that evening, she found herself looking out the same window as the night before. Down on the street, a small figure leaned against the security booth Ethan, checking his watch under the streetlight. She wondered what kind of life he led beyond that uniform. Did he have a family? Dreams? Why did his eyes carry that calmness, as if he had seen too much already? As the rain began again, Ava whispered to her reflection, "Why do I feel safer around a stranger than people I have known all my life?" Far below, Ethan looked up at the same building, rain glinting in his hair. He touched the silver necklace in his pocket, the one she had lost, and closed his hand around it. "Sleep well, Ava," he murmured to the empty street. "You have no idea who is really watching over you." Neither of them knew that the line between protector and secret would soon blur, and what started as duty would soon turn into something neither of them had planned, for something powerful enough to change both of their lives forever. Days passed, and the rhythm of Ava's life shifted in quiet, unexpected ways. Ethan became a constant presence, always there, always calm, never crossing the line between professionalism and warmth. He drove her to work, stood discreetly near the elevator during meetings, and waited in the lobby when she visited clients. Yet somehow, his silence spoke more than any board member's words. At first, Ava tried to ignore the sense of safety he brought. She told herself it was temporary, a precaution after the paparazzi incident, but soon she found herself scanning the crowd for his face, unconsciously listening for the steady sound of his footsteps behind her. One afternoon, after a tense meeting with investors, she left the office early. The sky was overcast again, the same gray tone as the night they met. As she stepped outside, Ethan opened the door of the black SUV. "You are leaving early," he said. "I needed air," she replied, sliding into the back seat. "Drive anywhere quiet." "And Ving." He nodded and started the engine. They drove through Central Park, the city noise fading into soft rustles of wind and distant horns. Finally, they stopped near a lakeside path. Ava stepped out, breathing deeply. The air smelled of wet leaves and faint rain. Ethan followed a few steps behind, giving her space but never too far. She glanced over her shoulder. "You can relax, you know. No one is going to attack me in Central Park." "Maybe," he said, "but my job is not to assume that." She smiled faintly. "You really take that seriously, do you not?" "Every job deserves respect," he answered. For a moment, she studied him the way he stood, posture straight, eyes scanning quietly. "You sound like someone who has done more than security work," she said. He looked at her then, his expression unreadable. "Let us just say I have seen what happens when people forget to protect what matters." They walked along the path until they reached a small bridge over the lake. Children's laughter echoed nearby, and the scent of roasted peanuts drifted in the air. Ava rested her arms on the railing, watching the ripples below. "My mother used to bring me here," she said softly. "Before all of this, before business became my entire identity." Ethan's voice lowered. "She must have been proud." "She was," Ava said, "but she died when I was 19. After that, I just worked. I thought if I built enough, achieved enough, maybe I would feel close to her again. But the truth is, success feels quieter than grief." Ethan said nothing. He just listened, eyes steady on the water. His silence did not feel empty. It felt safe. When she turned to look at him, she caught the faintest softness in his expression, something almost sorrowful. "What about you, Ethan?" she asked. "Who do you protect when you are not protecting me?" He hesitated. "No one anymore." The answer was simple, but it carried the weight of something unspoken. Ava did not push further. Instead, she reached into her purse, pulling out a small sketchbook. She flipped through a few pages, then handed it to him. "This is what I do when I cannot sleep," she said. Ethan opened it carefully. Inside were sketches, cityscapes, faces, fleeting emotions caught in graphite. On one page was a drawing of a man standing in the rain, his jacket draped over someone's shoulders. "You drew this," he said quietly. "It was the only way I could remember that night," she admitted. "It felt like something real in a world where everything else is staged." He closed the book gently, meeting her eyes. "You have talent," he said. "You are the first person who has said that without sounding polite." "Maybe because I mean it," he replied. Their eyes met, and for the first time, she felt the space between duty and feeling begin to blur. The sound of rain returned, soft and steady. Ethan stepped closer, holding out his hand as droplets started to fall. "Come on," he said. "We should get back before it gets heavy." But she did not move. "Ethan," she said, her voice almost a whisper, "why do I feel like I can trust you more than anyone else I know?" He exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. "Because I have nothing to gain from lying to you." The rain thickened, falling harder now. He removed his jacket again and placed it around her shoulders, just like the first night. She looked up at him, eyes bright beneath the gray sky. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." He gave a slight nod. "That is my job, Miss Nguyen." But when she turned away, she missed the way his expression faltered, the flicker of conflict in his eyes. Protecting her was supposed to be simple. Stay invisible. Do the job. Leave when it was done. Yet every time she looked at him like that, as if he was more than a guard, more than a shadow, Ethan felt the walls he had built begin to crack. That night, as Ava slept in her penthouse, Ethan sat alone in the security office downstairs, the glow from the monitors reflecting in his eyes. He reached into his pocket and held the silver necklace again. On one of the screens, a live feed showed Ava by her window, sketching something in the dim light. He smiled faintly. "She thinks she is safe because of me," he murmured to himself. "If she knew the truth, she would never let me stay." He closed his hand around the necklace. Outside, thunder rolled through the city once more. The storm was coming back, and with it, the secret he could no longer keep buried. The next week unfolded like a blur of meetings, interviews, and corporate noise. Yet in between the chaos, Ava found small, quiet moments that seemed to matter more than the entire empire she ran. Every morning, Ethan was already waiting by the car, polished and steady, a silent guardian at her side. Every evening, he stood near the elevator, nodding once when she returned safely. It should have felt routine. Instead, it began to feel like the only part of her day that made sense. One evening, after a long charity event hosted by the city's elite, Ava finally stepped outside, exhausted. Flashbulbs burst like fireworks as photographers lined the red carpet. She smiled for the cameras out of habit, but her eyes kept searching for one face. And there he was, Ethan, standing near the security barricade, eyes scanning the crowd, posture composed. He caught her glance for only a second, but that was enough. Something inside her eased. When the car door closed behind her, she let out a long breath. "I will never get used to that," she murmured. Ethan's voice came from the front seat. "You handled it perfectly." She smiled faintly. "Do you ever rest, Ethan? Or are you programmed to stay alert 24 hours a day?" "I rest when you are safe," he said without hesitation. The answer made her chest tighten. She wanted to reply, but her phone buzzed with a message from Mr. Choi. "Board meeting at 8 amperes. M tomorrow. Discussion. Leadership vote." Her heart sank. She knew what that meant. They were planning to replace her, to use the arranged marriage contract as proof she was unfit to lead. She stared out the window, rain streaking down the glass like the night they first met. "Ethan," she said softly, "if you lost everything you worked for, what would you do?" He glanced at her reflection in the mirror. "Start over. I have done it before." "How?" she asked. "By remembering who I was before the titles, before the money," he said quietly. His words made her pause. "You talk like a man who has already lived several lives." He did not answer. When the car stopped at her building, she stayed still for a moment, gripping her phone. "Would you stay upstairs tonight?" she asked suddenly. "Just until tomorrow. I do not trust anyone from the board right now." Ethan looked at her, unsure. "It is against protocol for me to stay in the residence." "I know," she said, meeting his eyes. "But please, just tonight." He hesitated, then nodded once. "All right." Hours later, the city outside had gone quiet. Ava sat by the window, unable to sleep. The documents for the meeting lay spread across her coffee table. She could lose everything her family built within a single vote. A soft knock came at the door. She opened it to find Ethan, still in uniform, standing with a cup of tea. "You looked like you needed this," he said simply. She accepted it, smiling. "Thank you." They sat across from each other, the silence stretching comfortably between them. The glow from the city lights painted his face in gold and shadow. "Ethan," she began, her voice low, "do you ever wish you could just stop pretending? Stop hiding behind whatever job or mask you wear?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Every day." She leaned back, studying him. "You know, for a man who claims to be a security guard, you are remarkably well-spoken. You quote philosophy, you analyze business like an insider, and you know exactly how to negotiate without saying a word." He smiled slightly, but his eyes betrayed something deeper. "Maybe I just pay attention. Or maybe you are more than you claim to be," she said. "But I will respect your secrets for now." He looked away, the muscle in his jaw tightening. "Some secrets protect people, Ava, including you." That night, he slept on the couch in the living room while she tried to rest in her bedroom. But sleep would not come. The sound of rain against the glass was steady, almost comforting. She rose quietly and walked out, finding him still awake, reading from his phone. "Could not sleep?" he asked. "Not even close," she said, sitting across from him. "Do you ever wonder what happiness really looks like?" He looked thoughtful. "For me, it used to be silence. Now I am not so sure." She smiled faintly. "For me, it used to be success. Now it is peace. I think peace looks a lot like you standing there in the rain." He met her eyes, and for a second, the air shifted. The distance between them vanished. The world outside the boardrooms, the cameras, the chaos, ceased to exist. Then, as if realizing the line he was about to cross, Ethan stood up. "You should rest," he said, voice quiet but firm. "Tomorrow will be difficult." She wanted to argue, but the steadiness in his tone stopped her. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Ava." When she finally fell asleep, Ethan remained by the window, watching the city flicker beneath them. In his pocket, his phone buzzed once. A message flashed across the screen. Carter Group. Board request. Urgent press statement pending. He stared at it for a long moment, the glow of the screen lighting his face. Then he locked the phone and looked back toward her room. The storm clouds were gathering again, both outside and inside his heart. Soon, he would have to decide continue hiding behind the mask of a bodyguard or reveal who he really was before the truth found her first. The morning came heavy with clouds. The city below still dripped from the night's rain, and the glass towers glowed dull silver under a sun that never fully broke through. Ava stood before the mirror, adjusting her blazer. Her reflection looked calm, but her pulse betrayed her. Today's board meeting would decide her fate. One vote, one motion, and the company her parents built could be stripped away. Ethan waited by the door, silent as always, but she sensed the storm brewing in his eyes, too. "You do not have to come in with me," she said, fastening her cufflinks. "I am not here because I have to," he answered simply. "I am here because I said I would protect you." His tone steadied her more than she wanted to admit. She picked up her files, nodded, and together they stepped into the elevator. The boardroom was colder than usual. 12 faces turned toward her as she entered, some guarded, some openly hostile. Bernard Choi, seated at the head of the table, smiled like a man who already knew the ending. "Miss Nguyen," he said smoothly, "thank you for coming. Shall we begin?" Ava sat, placing her documents before her. "Let us make this quick," she replied. The meeting began with financial reports and projections, but it was all noise. Ava could feel the tension building, the undercurrent of betrayal. When Bernard finally leaned forward, the room went still. "As per the board's motion," he said, "we are voting to transfer controlling shares to Coal Energy, pending Miss Nguyen's refusal to proceed with the merger marriage contract." Ava's breath caught. "You cannot force me into a contract that violates corporate ethics." Bernard smiled thinly. "You signed it under your father's authority years ago. It is binding." "That contract expired," she said, her voice rising. "And I will not let this company be traded like property." "Huh?" Bernard turned to the others. "Gentlemen, the vote stands." Before he could continue, the boardroom doors opened sharply. Every head turned. Ethan stepped inside, still in his black uniform, his expression unreadable. "Excuse me," Bernard snapped. "This is a closed meeting." Ethan's gaze was steady. "Not anymore." A murmur rippled through the room. Ava looked at him in shock. "Ethan, what are you doing?" He took a slow breath, eyes never leaving Bernard. "Mr. Choi, you failed to mention that Coal Energy was acquired last year." Bernard frowned. "That is irrelevant." "It is relevant," Ethan cut in, "because it was acquired by C Group Holdings." Ava blinked. "C Group?" Ethan turned toward her, voice calm but strong. "Yes, and I own it." The room froze. The silence was so deep that the hum of the air conditioner sounded deafening. Bernard's face went pale. "That is impossible." Ethan reached into his jacket and placed a folder on the table. "Here are the acquisition papers, filed in public. You can verify them." The directors leaned forward, whispering among themselves. Ava stared at him, struggling to process what she had just heard. "You are the owner of C Group?" she whispered. He nodded once. "Ethan Cole Carter. I kept the name quiet for a reason." Bernard stammered, Why would a billionaire pretend to be a bodyguard?" Ethan's gaze darkened. "Because I wanted to see who in this city still understood loyalty. I invested in Ava Nguyen years ago. I watched from a distance as this board tried to control her, to use her name for profit. I wanted to see if integrity still existed here, and it does." He turned toward Ava, his voice softening. "In her..." The board erupted in confusion, questions firing from every corner. Bernard tried to speak, but Ethan's authority silenced the room. "Effective immediately," he said, "I am revoking all pending agreements with Coal Energy. Any attempt to remove Miss Nguyen from her position will result in legal action and complete withdrawal of my investment funds." No one argued. They could not. Ava rose slowly, still stunned. "You knew who I was, all this time." "Yes," Ethan said quietly. "But I needed to know who you were without the headlines, without the money, without the walls." Her throat tightened. "You lied to me." "I hid from you," he corrected gently. "Not because I wanted to deceive you, but because I wanted to earn your trust as a man, not as a name." The weight of his words filled the room. Ava looked at him for a long moment, torn between anger and something deeper. Finally, she turned to the board. The meeting is over. You all know where you stand. When the room emptied, she remained by the window, watching the rain begin again. Ethan stayed a few feet behind her, silent. You destroyed Bernard with one sentence, she said quietly, and yet I do not know whether to thank you or walk away. He stepped closer. You do not owe me either. I just did what I should have done from the start. She turned, her eyes glistening. Why reveal it now? Because they were about to take what you built, he said, and because I could not watch you lose everything while I stayed hidden. For a long moment, they said nothing. The city outside shimmered through the rain. Then Ava whispered, You really are impossible. Emble. Ethan smiled faintly. So are you. He started to leave, but she stopped him. Ethan. He turned. Do not disappear again, she said. Not until I decide whether to forgive you. He gave a small nod, eyes softening. I can live with that. As he walked out, she finally let herself breathe. Somewhere inside the chaos, a truth had surfaced not about wealth or power, but about trust. She had fallen for the man who stood beside her in the storm, not knowing he carried an empire in his name. And now that she did, nothing in her world would ever be the same again. The next 48 hours felt like an eternity. News outlets across the country exploded with headlines about the secret billionaire who had posed as a bodyguard to protect a young CEO. Cameras swarmed the front of Avenir headquarters, reporters shouting questions about Ava Nguyen and Ethan Cole Carter. Inside her penthouse, Ava watched the coverage in silence. Every channel replayed the same moment, the look on her face when Ethan revealed the truth in that boardroom. Some called it the most romantic corporate twist of the year. Others called it deceit. She turned off the television and stared out at the skyline. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried that same tension, thick and metallic, like a storm that refused to fade. Her phone buzzed with messages from friends, investors, and journalists, but she ignored them all. The only name she searched for was his, Ethan. He had vanished after the board meeting. No calls, no messages, no trace. A knock echoed through the penthouse. Ava turned, her heart racing for reasons she refused to admit. When she opened the door, it was her assistant, Leah, carrying a large envelope. This was delivered for you, Miss Nguyen, Leah said softly. Ava took it. By who? He did not give his name, Leah replied, then hesitated. But he left this. She handed over a small silver necklace, the same one Ava had lost the night she met Ethan. Ava's fingers trembled. She opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note, written in clean, steady letters. Ava, I never meant for you to find out this way. I wanted to protect you, not just from them, but from me. The world I live in is complicated, full of people who would use what we have against us. I am stepping away for a while until it is safe for both of us. You once told me courage means doing what scares you most. For me, that means leaving before I ruin what you built. E.C. She read the note 3 times, each word cutting deeper. Then she closed her eyes, holding the necklace against her chest. Days turned into weeks. The noise in the media died down. Avenir's stock stabilized, and the board fell back in line under her leadership. On paper, everything looked perfect again. But every time Ava walked into her office and saw the empty space near the elevator, the silence felt heavier than success. One evening, she attended a charity gala, a rescheduled event from before the scandal. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and champagne laughter, but Ava felt like a ghost among the glitter. A reporter approached her. Miss Nguyen, people are calling your story a modern fairy tale. Do you have any comment about Mr. Carter? Ava smiled politely. Fairy tales are for people who believe in endings, she said. I prefer beginnings. She moved to the corner of the room, where the noise faded. A display board caught her eye. It was a silent auction of art pieces donated for charity. Her breath caught when she saw one in particular, a framed black and white photograph titled The Protector. It showed a man holding an umbrella over a woman's head under heavy rain. The caption beneath read, Some vows do not need an altar, just courage. Her heartbeat quickened. She knew that handwriting. Behind her, a deep, familiar voice spoke quietly. I was hoping you would see that. Ava turned. Ethan stood a few steps away, dressed in a dark suit, no longer hiding behind a uniform. The crowd around them blurred into silence. You disappeared, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I had to make sure the press moved on, he replied. Your company needed space to recover. And what about me, she asked. Did I not deserve a word? He looked down. I did not trust myself to stay if I saw you again. There was no anger in her eyes now, only exhaustion and truth. You saved my life, Ethan. Twice. Once on that street and again in that boardroom. But you cannot keep saving people by running away from them. He met her gaze, emotion flickering behind his calm exterior. You are right, he said. I have spent my life hiding behind my money, my name, my duty. The only time I ever felt real was when I was just a man standing beside you in the rain. Ava stepped closer. Then be that man again. No titles, no bodyguards, no billionaires, just Ethan. He took a breath that trembled slightly. If I do that, there is no going back. Good, she said. I am tired of going back. For a moment, neither moved. The music swelled softly in the distance, a slow piano melody echoing through the hall. Then Ethan reached into his pocket and held out something small. It was the same silver necklace, now polished and shining under the chandelier light. I kept it because it reminded me of courage, he said. But it belongs to you. Ava shook her head. Keep it. You need it more than I do. He smiled faintly. Maybe we both do. The auction host announced her name from the stage, but Ava did not move. The crowd around them blurred into background noise. For the first time in months, she felt the storm inside her begin to quiet. Ethan extended his hand. May I take you away from here, Miss Nguyen? She placed her hand in his, her voice barely above a whisper. Only if you promise not to disappear again. I promise, he said. No more secrets. They walked out of the ballroom together, past the glittering lights and the noise of the city beyond the glass doors. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall again, soft and steady, as if the sky itself remembered. Under that rain, Ethan lifted the umbrella over her just like he had on the night they first met. Ava looked up at him, smiling through the drizzle. Funny, she said. The first time we met, you saved me from the rain. Now it feels like the rain is giving you back to me. Ethan looked down at her, eyes warm. Maybe it is. Or maybe we were both just waiting for the same storm to end. And as they walked into the night, side by side, the world outside them finally felt quiet. No titles, no disguises. Only two people who had found courage in each other and love strong enough to survive the truth. Weeks passed, and the noise of the media slowly faded into memory. What remained was something quiet, something real. Ava and Ethan began to live in a rhythm that neither of them had known before. It was not about headlines, contracts, or cameras. It was coffee in the morning sunlight, long walks by the Hudson River, and the rare peace of two people finally breathing without pretending. Ethan had resigned from all official duties at C Group for the first time in 10 years. He told the board he was taking a sabbatical, though the truth was simpler. He wanted to learn what life felt like without the weight of power pressing on his shoulders. Sometimes, Ava would tease him. How does it feel, Mr. Billionaire, to wait in line for a taxi like the rest of us? He would smile, his hand finding hers. Strangely freeing, he would say. They spent weekends renovating a small art gallery downtown, Ava's dream project, that had always been postponed by business obligations. Ethan insisted on doing real work, rolling paint on the walls until his sleeves were splattered with color. When she laughed at the sight, he looked at her with the kind of softness that carried no need for words. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the high windows, Ava unpacked a box of sketches. Among them was the original drawing she had made after their first night together in the storm, the silhouette of a man holding his jacket over a woman's shoulders. She placed it on a central wall. Ethan stepped beside her. You kept it. I never throw away reminders of miracles, she said. He reached out, tracing the edge of the frame. That night changed everything for me. I thought I had built an empire, but the truth is, I was just protecting myself from feeling anything real. You ruined that. She smiled. You are welcome. Later that evening, as they locked up the gallery, a light drizzle began to fall. Ava laughed softly. It always rains when we start something new. Then maybe rain is our good luck, he said, taking her hand as they walked toward the car. At home, they cooked dinner together, something Ava had not done in years. The kitchen filled with the scent of garlic and laughter. She burned the bread, and Ethan pretended not to notice. When the meal was done, they sat by the window with 2 glasses of wine, watching the city lights shimmer across the river. Ava looked at him, the quiet in her voice deeper than words. You know, when I first met you, I thought you were the calm in my chaos, but now I think you were the storm that pushed me to start again. Ethan smiled, setting his glass down. And you were the reason I stopped running. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The city hummed below them, alive and endless. Then Ethan stood, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out the same silver necklace, the symbol that had followed them through every twist of fate. I kept this because it reminded me of courage, he said. But I think it means something else now. He gently placed it in her hand. To me, it means home. Ava looked down at the necklace, then back at him. And where exactly is home, Ethan? He stepped closer, resting his forehead against hers. Wherever you are. Outside, the rain fell harder, but inside, everything felt still. The world that had once demanded so much from them had finally given something back. Peace, love, and a sense that every mistake, every storm, had led them exactly here. For the first time in their lives, both of them stopped looking forward or back. They simply stayed in this moment, together, as the sound of rain wrapped around their laughter like a promise kept. The grand opening of Ava's art gallery arrived on a clear spring evening. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of fresh paint and blooming magnolias from the park across the street. The glass doors gleamed under the soft golden lights of the sign above them. The Art of Courage. Inside, guests moved through the white-walled space, their laughter mingling with the gentle hum of piano music. Each piece on display told a story not of fame or wealth, but of resilience, of second chances. At the center stood the sketch that had started it all, a man holding his jacket over a woman in the rain. Beneath it was a small plaque that read, "For the one who reminded me that protection can be love." Ava stood quietly by the window, dressed in soft ivory satin, her hair swept back loosely. She had greeted every investor, every reporter, and every friend, but her eyes kept returning to the doorway, waiting for him. When Ethan finally appeared, the room seemed to soften. He was in a simple black suit, no tie, his expression calm yet full of pride. In his hand, he carried a small bouquet of white tulips, the same kind that had been placed at her mother's grave every year. "You made it," Ava said as he approached. "I would not have missed it," Ethan replied. "I wanted to see what courage looks like when it finally finds peace." She smiled. "It looks like you, standing right here." For a while, they walked together through the gallery, stopping at each piece. Guests greeted them warmly, but everyone seemed to understand that something sacred surrounded the two of them, a quiet story that no camera could truly capture. At the far end of the gallery was a new piece no one had seen before, hidden under a velvet cloth. Ava took a microphone from the podium. The chatter in the room hushed. "Tonight," she said, her voice clear and steady, "this gallery is not just about art. It is about moments that change us, moments that teach us what love looks like when it costs something. This final piece is dedicated to the person who reminded me that bravery is not loud. Sometimes it is silent, standing in the rain." She nodded to Ethan, and together they lifted the cloth. The painting underneath showed a woman in a white coat standing in the rain beside a man holding an umbrella. They were not touching, but the space between them glowed with warmth. Below the image was a handwritten line. "Every protector deserves someone to protect him too." Ethan stood motionless, his jaw tightening slightly. "You painted this?" "I did," Ava said softly. "And I hope you know what it means." He looked at her, his eyes bright. "I do. It means I am finally allowed to stop pretending I am not in love with you." A quiet murmur spread through the crowd, but neither of them cared. Ava smiled, her voice trembling with emotion. "Then stop pretending." Ethan took her hands. "I thought love was supposed to be grand and dramatic, but it turns out it is just this two people standing still while the world keeps spinning. And for once," she whispered, "we are not running." The guests applauded softly as the pianist began to play a slower melody. Ethan bent his head, kissing her forehead gently. The flash of cameras caught the moment, but for them, the world had faded into silence. When the evening ended and the last guest had gone, they stood alone in the gallery. The lights reflected off the rain beginning to fall outside, a quiet echo of the night they first met. Ava leaned against his shoulder, her voice barely audible. "Do you ever think about how everything started?" Ethan smiled. "Every day. A storm, a mistake, a woman who refused to give up. That was my beginning. And this," she said, "is mine." He kissed her hand. Then let us make sure it never ends. Outside, the rain fell steady and slow. But inside, the gallery glowed warm, a sanctuary of light, love, and the kind of courage that no storm could ever wash away. 6 months later, the world around them had slowed to a peaceful rhythm. The storm that had once defined their lives was now just a memory, a story that people whispered about in admiration. Ava's gallery had become a symbol of healing, a space where art and compassion intertwined. Every exhibit carried the same quiet message: courage, love, and truth. That morning, sunlight poured through the high glass windows as Ava arranged fresh tulips on the front desk. The city outside was bright and calm, the air warm with the promise of summer. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Ethan walking in, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Good morning, Miss Nguyen," he said, his tone playful. She smiled. "I thought we agreed you could stop calling me that." "Old habits," he said, handing her the coffee. "I like the way it sounds." They walked through the empty gallery together. The light reflected on the polished floor, painting them in gold. Ethan stopped by the centerpiece, the same sketch that had begun everything. He studied it quietly. "It is strange," he said. "This drawing used to remind me of everything I was afraid of: exposure, loss, vulnerability. Now it just reminds me of you." Ava rested her hand on his arm. "Maybe that is what courage does. It turns fear into love." He smiled. "Then I suppose I finally learned something worth keeping." Later that evening, the gallery hosted a small, private event, a fundraiser for underprivileged artists. As the guests mingled, Ethan stood by the doorway, watching Ava speak with confidence and grace. He thought about how far they had come. The woman who once ran from her destiny now stood tall within it. When the last guests left, he approached her with a small velvet box in his hand. "Before we lock up," he said quietly, "I have one last exhibit to show you." Ava frowned, amused. "Another surprise?" He nodded, opening the box. Inside was a ring, a simple band of white gold, delicate yet timeless. "You once said that courage means doing what scares you most," he said. "For me, that means asking this question. Ava Nguyen, will you marry me not as a contract, not as a merger, but as my equal, my home, my forever?" Tears welled in her eyes, but her voice was steady. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she laughed through her tears. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall again, tapping softly against the windows as if blessing the moment. Ethan pulled her close, their foreheads touching. "Looks like the rain still follows us," he said. "Then let it," Ava answered. "It brought us together every time." As the lights dimmed in the gallery, the final frame of their story came into focus. 2 silhouettes standing beneath the same umbrella, side by side, facing a world no longer defined by secrets or storms, but by love that had been tested and proven true. And for the first time, both of them knew this was not the ending. It was the beginning of forever.